You know, I'm always looking for new and interesting ways to use granny squares. And so I had a thought this week. I thought it might be fun if we did something kind of different, but still very fun and springy and summery and warm weather project-y. I have these two spider plant babies that I planted, I don't know, like a month ago, which that they're getting so big, honestly. They grew really fast. But yeah, they have these just clear nursery pots, which by the way is totally genius if you're a plant fanatic like I am, because you can see the roots and you can watch how things are going. But you know, it's not the prettiest to look at. They need a cover. And instead of buying something, I thought it would be a lot more fun if we crocheted something. So that's what we're gonna do today. We're gonna try to custom fit a planter cover specifically for this size planter, but if it works out, we'll try, you know, different sizes perhaps. So these planters are, I believe, 5 inches. Yeah, about 5 inches in diameter, but you know, they're like 3.5 inches on the bottom and they taper up a little bit. So that's interesting to know. We're gonna have to do some clever increases perhaps to make that doable. But we have a general starting point. The yarn that we're going to use is one of my all-time favorites. This is Bernat Maker yarn. It's a cotton nylon blend, and you know, if you ask me, you can't find a better yarn for stitch definition. That's one of the reasons why I just love this yarn. Stitches just look so good in this yarn, but also it's great for projects like this. I tend to use it for home decor things, and it's just, I don't know, it's just one of my favorite yarns. We've got a few different color options here. This one is soft peach, and then we also have jam, and these have been in my collection for a little while. This one is definitely steel blue. I'm gonna have to look up what this color is called because I don't remember at the moment. So that's what we have to work with. I really do love this combo. But I think we will start with the blue yarn for the base, at least on this first one. So this label recommends an 8mm, which, man, that's real big. Generally speaking, I think the yarn label is a good recommendation for a normal type of drape, but for this, I know I want it to be more sturdy and a lot more dense, so 8mm is much too big, I think, for what I want to accomplish. So we're gonna drop down pretty drastic here. I think I'm real tempted to go to like a 5 or a 5.5mm. Ooh, can we pull it off on a 5? I like to do the hook check a little bit. Hook check, hook test. It's kind of hard to say. Basically all I'm doing here is just seeing how easy it is to stay on my hook. Here, if we're using like a hook that's real small, like this is a 3.5, it's just, you can see there's not a ton of extra room there, so this, you know, obviously would be too small and it just wouldn't stay on the hook easy enough. So I like to do the hook check. I'm gonna start with a 5 and we'll see how that goes. So I think the strategy is to crochet the bottom in rounds and work up the side to like, I don't know, maybe like an inch or so, and then we'll reserve the top part for the granny square, which is going to be pretty small on this one. Maybe we won't come up too far. Might have to play around with that, and then we'll have a little bit of extra up at the top. So that's generally what I'm thinking. As I was rambling on about that, I quickly made a magic knot. That is generally my favorite way of starting in the round, just because it gives you a really tight closure. It's not the most beginner-friendly technique, but it is a very doable technique. You don't have to be a pro. You just need a lot of practice with it to figure out its quirks. But I have a couple of videos that show how to do this technique really slow. I'll link them if you need them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. The other thing that I have picked up in my years of crocheting in the round, generally speaking, if you're using one stitch, there's kind of a staple number of stitches to start with on your first round. So for single crochets, I always start with 6 stitches. For half doubles, it's always 8, and for doubles, it's always 10. And that, for me, just works out to be the neatest looking circle. So I have 6 single crochets in my magic loop. I hate joining in the round, especially when I'm working with single crochets, so I am going to work in a spiral. We'll have to fix this later because it will create a jog in the work, but that's not a big deal at all. So the other thing that you can commit to memory if you're still kind of new at crocheting, and especially crocheting in the round, the second round is always increase every stitch. So make 2 single crochets in every stitch in this case. And that will double your stitch count. So we started with 6, we'll end up with 12 at the end of this round. And that's how you will keep this circle flat, if you will. Eventually we'll stop increasing, and that's what will create the sides, like it'll make it turn upward, but we don't want to do that yet. So anytime you work on the third round of a circle, doesn't matter which stitch you're working on, what yarn, what hook size, any of that, your third round will always increase every other stitch. So round 2, you increase every stitch. Round 3, you increase every other. And you can start that however you want. You can start with just 1 stitch if you like, or you can start with 2 stitches in the first one. And let's do 1 in the first one, and then we'll increase in the next one. And then 1. And so this time your stitch count is very easy to figure out. It follows kind of a, I don't know, fancy math formula thing. Not really, it's really basic math, but it will increase by 6. So the other rule of thumb with crocheting in the round is that your stitch count will always increase by the number of stitches you started with. Since the first stitch of this round was 1 stitch, that means our last stitch will have 2. And that's because we're alternating, right? We have 1 stitch and then we have 2 stitches, and 1, 2, and as you alternate evenly around, that will give you 2 stitches in the last one here. So we'll put a single crochet, just 1 in the first stitch, and we'll do 1 in the next stitch, and then we would increase. But there's an easier way to memorize that. There's actually 2 easy ways. On the previous round, we had 1 stitch between the increases, right? An increase is just 2 stitches in one. So on this round, we're going to have 2 stitches between the increases. And then on the round after that, we'll have 3 stitches between the increases, and then 4, 5, 6, and it goes up from there. The other way you can figure this out is the second stitch of the increase, though, has another increase. So there's 2 ways you can memorize crocheting circles. You really don't have to have a pattern to follow this. Once you get all of these little, I don't know, fundamentals, I guess what I keep calling them, but once you get these things memorized, crocheting in circles is really, really easy. So remember, we had 2 single crochets between our increases on the previous round, so this time we'll have 3, remember? If you haven't worked with this yarn before, man, it really is one of my favorites. It's so nice to work with. It's really, really soft on your hands, but it has a nice stretch to it, and it just makes it really easy and really nice to work with. If you want to try this yarn, I'll link it in the description below. I know you can buy it on Amazon if you like to do your shopping there. You can order directly from Yarnspirations, which is Bernat. And I'm pretty sure that they sell this at your local craft store too. I think I've seen it at Joann's before. I'm not sure about Michael's. Those are the only two that are in my area, so I can't speak to the others, but just a really nice yarn to try. If you have a cool stitch pattern that you really want to show off, like in a blanket or something like that, this would be just a really good yarn. So the last increasing round, we had 3 single crochets between our increases. That means this time we'll have 4 between our increases. This is about the same diameter as the bottom of this planter. It's a teeny bit shorter. I think you're just gonna have to trust me on this one because I don't want to dump my plant everywhere. But yeah, it's actually right about the exact same size. So with that being said, I think we are safe to not increase anymore. Okay, so we have added 2 more rounds without increasing, and we've got a nice little curl to it, which is great, but we're gonna flip it the other way. So that way the front side of our stitches are showing on the outside. I think we have a pretty good setup here. It's actually curling up a lot more right there than it is in the back, but I think this was the magic number. I think we're clear and we should be safe to keep crocheting. I would say at least 2 more rounds is what I'm going to try. I obviously don't want to, you know, take up so much space on the side with just a plain stitch like this. We want the granny squares to be what's really noticeable, but yeah, we need to have that nice sturdy base. So this year, I've actually started planting like vegetables. I have potatoes growing outside. I am so excited about these potatoes. I was so worried that they wouldn't come up and then it wouldn't work, and I'm still kind of worried that something will happen to them, but also just so incredibly excited to have potatoes that I grew in my backyard. Totally crazy. I've got a couple of other things growing too. I started some carrot seeds and they're kind of growing. Not as good as the potatoes, but I'm also growing, I have a raised bed that I'm calling the salad bed. So I have a variety of different types of lettuces for like a spring mix kind of salad. We eat that a lot in the spring and summer. So those also aren't doing quite as well as the potatoes, but it's a learning experience. Those ones came from seeds, and I don't know, there's probably something I'm not doing right for them to grow as prolific as maybe they should be at this point, because it's been like a month and a half or so since I planted those. But yeah, also I have some nasturtiums I started from seeds, which is probably the most difficult thing that I have ever started from a seed in my limited experience. And I want to try growing some tomato plants this year and some herbs. Definitely some cilantro and some dill and parsley. We eat those probably the most, but rosemary, lavender, I love all of that. I don't know. I'm just totally obsessed with plants this year. So if you have any advice for me about growing some of these herbs and vegetables, I could definitely use it. So that was 2 more rounds of non-increasing. Ooh, perfect. I think this, like the height is probably enough. I don't think I want to add any more to that because I do want to have enough space for the granny squares to really be the focus of the project. So let's leave this here. First, get a quick measurement of the circumference here, 12 inches. So that's okay. That's actually a really good round number to work with because a lot of things divide evenly into 12, and that's what we need to figure out how many granny squares we need and how big the granny squares need to be. So we could do 2-inch granny squares and we would need 6 to go around. We could also use 3-inch granny squares, and we would need 4 of them. All right, we're about 2 1/4 inches. In theory, it seems like 2 1/4 is close enough, right? But you take 1/4 and you multiply that 6 times, we have an extra 1.5 inches that this will be. So that's obviously not going to work. We're gonna try one more round. I think that will do the trick. There we go. I crocheted this round the exact same as the other round. The only difference, of course, is there's the cluster in between, which I did not crochet the chains. Still did the chain 1 for the corners, and still really, really liking that, actually. I might have to make that permanent adjustment to how I make granny squares. But let's see if it's the right size. Ooh, we are like 3 inches on the nose. This might actually work. Had it not worked, the next thing I would try, and still might actually try, we'll see. Dropping down a hook size will condense the stitches even more, and it will bring the size overall down just a little bit. Or alternatively, if we needed to make it a little bit bigger and do a 2-round granny square, we could have gone up a hook size, and that would have worked. So we still have those 2 options if this for some reason doesn't work. I think the only reason why this won't work is it's good to have a little bit of stretch when you need something to fit, but we'll just have to cross that bridge when we come to it. How cute did these turn out? I'm super thrilled with them. By the way, if you're not sure how to crochet a granny square, I do have a tutorial and a pattern and everything that you would need to crochet a granny square that looks just like this. The only difference between this one and that one is just the corner. Remember, I'm experimenting with 1 chain in the corners of these granny squares, and that pattern has 2. So I'll have the tutorial and the pattern linked below if you need to have that. You should be able to follow the first 3 rounds and crochet a granny square that looks just like these. I think I'm gonna use my favorite, it's kind of my favorite. I have several favorite ways of joining granny squares, but I think my go-to join for granny squares is the single crochet using the inner loops only. I'm gonna do that. I think it'll give it some really good texture, and I think that'll be interesting for this. And if it looks awful, we'll just, you know, change course and do something different. You know, one thing I didn't think about is the stitch count. So initially my thought was to just slip stitch along, catching a stitch like every double crochet and every one here. But I don't know if we have enough stitches. So we have 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 20, 27, 30, 33, 36. We're in good shape. And voila, we have our 4 granny squares attached to our base, and it does not look very impressive. Ooh, it's really tall. It definitely needs something on the top edge here, even though we don't have a ton of room. We might need to make smaller granny squares. I don't know. I don't want to create too much extra work for myself, but obviously I want it to fit and look good. Well, good morning. Afternoon, actually. So yesterday, I went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth on joining these granny squares, making them in the right size, basically just coming up with something that I was really happy with. The granny squares were too big, which was an issue because it has to fit, you know, within a relatively small space. But the joins just looked really wonky and messy, and I tried several different ways of joining them. I tried the invisible seam, which normally I do like, and that still just didn't look right. But this, I think, is a game changer. Why don't we join as you go? I know, right? Why didn't I think about this yesterday? I don't know. So I went ahead and crocheted these 4 granny squares, just the first 2 rounds, because the last round will join as you go. So these are all ready to go, crocheted in the 4.5 millimeter. We still need to join this to a base, and we have to have a specific number of stitches to make that happen. So technically for each granny square, we need to have 11 stitches in the bottom, so that way when we join them all the way around, we have 1 stitch for each granny square, and the base and everything matches up as it should. So before we had 6 rounds of increasing, and I still have 6 rounds of increasing here, but that gives us 36 stitches. That means we're still short by 8 stitches. I don't want to get too far into it because I know that that's kind of complicated and it's not everybody's thing to know and understand. Sometimes you just want to know what to crochet and you don't really care how you got there. But for those who may actually be interested in that, you'll figure it out in the pattern breakdown. So bottom line, this base now has 6 increased rounds, 1 round that isn't increased, and then 2 more weird increased rounds where we just add a total of 8. So this now has 44 stitches, and that means once we get all of these granny squares joined, and we have 44 stitches to cover, this will work out like we need it to. This is like the perfect project to learn how to join as you go, because we just have 4 granny squares that we're joining, and it covers pretty much all of the basics that you would need to know to join as you go. So we'll use the 4.5 millimeter for this one as well. You'll fasten on in any of the corners that you want. I like to do just a weird standing stitch where I did a chain there, right, to fasten on the yarn, but then I'm just going to go right into the double crochet. So just like that. And it's okay that it's kind of scrunched down. It actually makes the corner look better in the long run when you do it that way. So the goal for the first granny square in join as you go is you want to finish 3 sides. Well, I'm not totally finish 3 sides, but for the most part. You'll see what I mean here in a minute. On this corner here, you'll only work 3 double crochets. So this corner and this corner will finish at the very end of joining these together. So there, that's what our first granny square looks like. Now we can grab our next one and pick any corner you want. Doesn't really matter. Find your corner space there. Just place it on your hook and then slip stitch so that it is attached. I like to just sort of flip it, and then I can easily work on this part of the granny square but still have access to this one back here because we'll do the joins. So also for this one, I don't like to chain up or anything because this corner we will also finish later. So go straight into your 3 double crochets and then find the space between these 3 and these 3 and slip stitch there. Then go back to your front granny square and make your 3 double crochets between the 2 corners there. Slip stitch to the back and then start crocheting here in the corner. So for this corner we will finish it, but we do need to join with the granny square on the back here. So just work 3 double crochets first and then find your corner space on the back granny square, slip stitch there, and then I like to chain 1 here. It makes the corner a little bit neater, and then finish this corner with 3 double crochets. So there, this is what it looks like right now. We've got this one almost completed, and we have this join all ready to go. So then what we need to do is finish this side and down this side. Not finish the corner totally, we'll actually work it just like we did this one here. On this last corner, We'll leave it just with the 3 double crochets, and then just everything we did a moment ago to add this square, we'll do for the next square. Okay, so there I have all 4 granny squares joined, but since we want to turn this into a tube, we can't just finish in the normal join as you go way, which would be to just crochet down this side and then all the way down the bottom. But we need to make this a round. Fold it in half. I've got the right side facing outward, and I'll find the corner on the back granny square here. Whoops. And then slip stitch there, make my chain 1, and now I'm really just acting as though I'm crocheting a normal join side. I'm just joining with the first double crochet. I'll chain 1 and then finish this corner, and then I can just crochet along the bottom. That way we have everything finished. And then what I like to do is just slip stitch to the space between here. Goodness gracious. I don't know what's wrong with me today and why I can't get my yarn and hook to cooperate with one another. Okay, then chain 1 and finish this corner. So that's all that's different here with this little section. And then join with the slip stitch just in that same space like before. And that's all there is to it. It ties everything together, and we have a clean, perfect little tube of granny squares. And it's perfect. It's just absolutely perfect for this pattern. So yeah. Overall, I think the join like this looks so much neater. I think we are on the right track. Now, since these granny squares are a little bit smaller than before, I think we still have enough room on the top to add some kind of, you know, interesting looking stitch pattern, but we're not really sure how much space we have. So I think the logical next step is to join the bottom. I'm gonna go back to my 5mm hook. I just really wanted to use the 4.5 on the granny squares because I needed them to be a decent amount smaller than what they were. We have a little bit of a raised texture with the join as you go, but not much. I do like the idea of having some kind of visual interest to it. I also really like the idea of crocheting it together because that's just easier, I think, than using a yarn needle. So let's tinker around with this. I think what I want to try is working in the front loop of the bottom, and then also use the front loop on the granny squares. Okay, let's kind of look at that for a second. Yeah, I think that's actually pretty nice. It has a subtle kind of raised texture to it, kind of like this, but not so much that it looks weird, you know? I like that. I think this is looking good. Oh yeah, definitely like how that's looking. Okay, so here's how I'm treating the corners. Now that I actually know I like it, I am just using the front loop on the base, or the bottom, and then slip stitching to the chain 1 space on the granny square, then using the next stitch over on the bottom, and then slip stitching into the corner on the next granny square. And then everything else is just using the front loop on the bottom and the front loop on the granny square. There we go. Now we can trim that. It looks really small like this, but I think the yarn has enough stretch that we don't have to worry. I brought a new plant for you to look at today. This is my jade plant that also is in one of these pots because I transferred it from a smaller pot. That's pretty darn good. Actually, that's really good. I am so happy with this. Definitely good changes were made, but we still have a little bit of room on the top to clean it up. It looks really bland and boring and just really unfinished. I like the idea of having just, you know, single crochet rounds that will match the bottom, but then it might be fun to do some kind of decorative thing on the top, especially because at least these little planter pot things, they have a lip on them. I'm not really sure if you can see that, but it has kind of a lip that we're working with, and I think we can cover that and make it look a little bit better. Yeah, I think let's just try a single crochet in every stitch, and then probably one for every corner so it matches the bottom. So we should have 11 stitches per granny square, which means we should have a total of 44 when we're done. Man, like, look what a difference just the one round did. Really made this start to look finished. You know, it's really starting to look good at this point. You know, I'm noticing in the stitches that are like right in between two granny squares, see how it kind of wants to bunch down a little bit? That kind of drives me crazy, but I think we can fix it a little bit with our tension. So if I make the stitch a little bit bigger, I think it should help fill in the gaps. You know what I mean? Like make it a little bit taller, but see how high I pulled up on that loop? Oh yeah, that totally worked. There. Much better. I don't know what it is about that. It's probably just me, but little things like that, they just drive me crazy. And it's easy to fix that way. You can just play with your tension a little bit, make those stitches looser. I probably should have done that on this first round, but I really didn't even think about it. But good to know that you can fix it on the second round if you find that to be the case too. That's probably all the extra height that we can get away with. But you know, there's a border stitch that I just absolutely love, and I just don't get the chance to use it very often. I think we're gonna try it on this and see if we can get away with it. This is a weird one. If you haven't seen it before, I am going to slip stitch to finish this round. We'll chain one to start the next one. So this stitch is called the reverse single crochet. It's also sometimes called the crab stitch because you're working the single crochet in the complete wrong direction. Now it has to be a border stitch because you can't work into it after the fact, but it looks so cool. It has such a neat, like, bumpy texture to it. Put the hook through the next one and single crochet, just like completely backwards. It takes a minute to get used to, and it's still kind of awkward, but yeah. Let me get a few more stitches. See how it makes these like raised bumps that there's no V or anything that you could work into later on. I don't know. It's just one of those really cool border stitches that's very situational, and I think we can get away with it here, hopefully. I hope it's not too tall already. This is definitely one of those stitches where practice goes a really long way. If you've never worked this border stitch before and you're trying it for the first time and it looks really weird, it doesn't look right, and it feels really awkward, don't worry. Like, that's completely normal. I'd say the first time that you use this stitch, you have to relearn how to hold everything and work backwards, kind of. So if it doesn't look perfect the first time around, just rip it out and try again. I think you'll see a lot of improvement on the next one, because you just have to do things a little different, you know, like change your muscle memory. But it's really fun. It's a really neat stitch. I think what I want to do, instead of slip stitching to finish it, I think I'm going to finish it with the tail as I'm weaving it in. Let's try going through here. Nope, that's okay. I'm in too much of a rush to see if this works because I think that's the last round that we need to crochet. We do need to weave in a few ends, but let's just see if this works. You know what? I think it worked. So much better than the other start that we had. I love how the joins look neat, the granny squares look neat. You know, you could leave off the base too. Obviously, if you're going to use this, you would need to take the planter out when you want to water it, if you have like drain holes on the bottom. This is really supposed to be more of a traditional kind of like decorative pot that you would set it down in. But I think you could still just omit the bottom completely and not have to take it off whenever you water the plant. I think if I were going to do that, I would do something really similar to what we did on the top. So just crochet maybe 2 rounds of the single crochet. Obviously not put the bumpy decorative border on there, because I don't think that would work for the bottom, but maybe it would, and maybe it might actually look pretty cute. But you know, total success. Very, very happy with how this turned out. I'm sure it's, you know, I'm not doing it justice by holding it up here, so I'll have some pictures here so you can see. I think you can get really creative with colors on this because granny squares are involved, and that's why this was just a really fun project. Yeah, super happy with it. I do want to have a way for you to replicate this and make one for yourself if you want. So I have a link to the pattern in the description below. You can view it completely for free on my website. Or if you want to support the channel, or you like to have the convenience of your patterns printed in front of you, or if you like to save them to your phone or your tablet, I have that option for you in my shop as well. So B.Hooked.com is our shop for all of our PDF patterns. We have some PDF pattern bundles, and we have some t-shirts if that's more your speed. Thank you so much for the support there. I really appreciate it so much. Happy hooking, and I'll see you in the next one.